All right, we're back. And we are chatting here on A New Day for You with the remarkable, and I'm sure you'll agree, Dr. Angela Bendolph, who is just sharing all kinds of, nuggets, tidbits, you know, pieces and points of perspective and intersectionality that I am so grateful that we are having an opportunity to bring to the loyal listeners of Inspire You on Air, the new Beat of the Bay. So before the break, Dr. Bendolph, we were talking about STEM and we were talking about, some of the paths that our young people were placed on and how you try to provide some other opportunities and mechanisms for them to find other paths. And well, let's go there and let's go to the remarkable woman that your mother must have been and how that shaped and formulated the person that we see in front of us. And we are just so grateful that you joined us.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm really enjoying myself and I really appreciate, the opportunity to speak with you and to share a little bit about, you know, I guess I yield myself to whatever I believe God intended for me to be here. And it's been a journey. It hasn't been a straight line. And, when you're young and trying to find yourself and find why you're here, it's really more like twisty twirly than anything, but it's definitely not a straight line. So if I can go back a little bit, so I grew up in a big family, and so I have seven sisters and brothers, and there's my mom and dad have 4 boys and 4 girls. So I'm number 6 in the line, 6 of 8, and I have 3 older brothers who really influenced actually my choice to go into engineering, really. So I have that male influence. And I grew up in a household where we didn't have gender specific roles. So I really didn't know that I was limited by being a girl, which can be a blessing and a curse. So
me too. Me too. My parents required me to know how to cook, clean,
right.
sew. I
Yeah.
tell people all the time, I say, getting married for me was not about finding a woman to do any of them things for me. I could do all that stuff myself. I'm sorry. Let me stop talking. Go on. My
But
bad.
that's so true. So when you grow up in a house like that, and back then, at least in my family, my mom's side of the family was small compared to my dad's side, but then she had these 8 kids. And so, everybody had to pitch in and do what they had to do. And the older ones helped raise the younger ones and so forth. So by virtue of the fact that my brothers influenced me, because my first brother, who was the oldest, I like to just say first and second. My first brother, he ended up going to Tuskegee, but it was really tough.
You know it.
So he went to Tuskegee, majored in architecture, and got a master's. And so that definitely influenced. So all of us who went to school were first generation, and so didn't really have anyone to carve out that path. Didn't really know what expectation. But I was blessed in having my first and second brother kind of give me insight. My second brother actually went to the University of Alabama and majored in electrical engineering. So that is really how I ended up at the University of Alabama, majoring in electrical engineering. So
what a blessing. What a blessing.
Yeah. So, but the side of the coin that was difficult transition for me is that I was the first girl on my mom's side to go to college. So I really didn't have my brothers could only get me so far, but I was happy I had them for certain guidance. But being a female, and then, it kind of set me apart in ways that, it's sometimes people say it's a blessing and a curse. And so you get labeled. It's so weird. Like you get labeled for being, like interested in school and, having a lot of book knowledge and stuff. And that's my jam, right? So I love that. I am a lifelong learner. I went back to school, late in my life to get a doctorate, right? So the doctorate was my personal goal. That's something that I wanted, and I waited, until a certain season of my life to pursue it. And so the response that I would get is like, oh Lord, what you in school for now? So it was never encouraging. It was mostly like, oh, here you go again. So just being able to navigate that, because to no one's fault, I grew up at the time that was perfect, where it was no longer, I guess, taboo for girls to go to school and pursue something different, right? So like my first sister and my second sister, who are, a few years older than me, so I hate to say limited, but they didn't have the options. And so it was a different experience for me. So it was just like, a perfect storm, if you will. So I had this opportunity to go and learn and experience things in college. And, it was just like amazing to me. And I was blessed. Like, for me not to really have anyone to really help me navigate the space as a female, as a Black female, because it's already, I was majoring in something that was already white male dominated. So in my classrooms at the University of Alabama, so I was at Alabama roughly 20 years after integration. So by that time, we had about 5% of the population, and there were 18,000 students. So there was like roughly about, I'll say about 12 to 1,500 of us. And so in my classes, a lot of time I was the only one, and the only one could be the only Black, or the only one could be the only female. The only one could be the only Black female,
Wow.
So
Yeah.
sometimes. And so as I matriculated higher and higher in my program and got to be a junior or a senior, the less and less, the smaller my classes became. And so the fewer females you saw. And so it was no longer, so, as you mentioned before, intersectionality. So it was more that I was female than I was Black, if that makes sense.
It
So
does to me.
so I encountered more, what I want to say, like pushback from being a female engineering student than I did a Black student, or, of course, when you put them both, of course, it was a Black female student. But here's the thing, this is how God works. Because, when you go back to my mom and my grandmom and all those people that prayed for me, they didn't know who I was going to become, right? Or what I was going to be doing, but they knew that they had somebody coming behind. And my mom used to always say, I have too many kids. I can't give them, money and all this kind of stuff, but I can give you something that you can't put a price tag on. And that's, she presented our faith and our spirituality to us and introduced us to the Lord, right? So she said, I can't go those places, but I'm going to trust God that he's going to make a way for you in those spaces. And when she said that, she was like a prophet, right? So she spoke these things into existence. So I, as a little Black girl who graduated from Blunt High School, I had a presidential scholarship to the University of Alabama.
Wow.
And so during our what do you call it? Our orientation, we got the invitation to go to the luncheon for the presidential scholars. And you can imagine how many people look like me there. So it was me and one of my lifelong friends. We met there and we became friends, right? So we were both engineering students, and to get a presidential, that said a lot back in 1984. That said a lot. And so I was just so privileged. And what happened is that regardless, and that's why I started the conversation, Dr. Raoul, with ancestors and legacy, because for me now, and this is how my mom raised me, for me, being able to achieve those things, there's no way I could do it alone, right? So I didn't just show up one day as Angela Bendolph, I showed up because so many people made sacrifices. I got to show up as this or the potential for this, because so many people made sacrifices. So many people saw something in me that I would have never, ever thought possible. And that's only because of the grace of God. And I give, all the glory to God for that, my parents, and the wisdom of the elders and the ancestors. That's who I am. That's what I'm passionate about. So when we start transitioning to ASALH, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, what comes through in my conversation isn't that I showed up one day and I'm great. You know what I'm saying? That is just not me, because that's not how I was raised. I showed up one day, and when I show up, I bring all these people with me, right?
Amen.
I bring my great grandfather. So this is why I'm so passionate. And I think that I wonder sometimes if I wore it as it wasn't a burden, but it certainly was a heady responsibility. So I met my great grandfather on my mom's side. I met my great grandfather, he was old my whole life, but he passed away when I was 12. And I think they, because they didn't keep records, unfortunately, of them. So the estimate is that he was about 103 years old, guesstimate when he was born. So he was born in the 19th century. He had all these amazing stories. I loved him. I mean, for a little girl, the sun and the moon and the universe revolved around him for me. So that was like, so when he passed away, I didn't even know this when he was alive. When he passed away, I found out that he couldn't read or write and that he signed his name with an X. And that had a profound impact on me, like in ways I didn't have the words when I was 12, when he passed away, to articulate it. But when I found out, my heart broke and I started crying, because I couldn't imagine that someone with so much grace and so much class and all these things, because I didn't know what the world was really like, because my world was, I was, what do I want to say? The word is not cocoon, but I grew up in a village, back then when the village raised you and everybody cared about each other. And so I didn't know what the world was really, really like for real. And it sounds odd that a girl who grew up in Trinity Gardens grew up sheltered, but they protected us and they introduced, I just didn't know, like when I didn't equate the sound bites on the news with experiences of my parents and my great-grandparents. I just didn't make that connection. And I remember one day okay, so those of you are gonna really know what I'm talking about when you sit down and you scratch your mom's scalp. That's just
yeah. Now you speaking to a very specific generation of people now. Wait, okay, hold up. Pause, okay. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just tuning in, this is a new day for you, and I am Dr. Raul Richardson, and we are joined today by virtue of my invitation and the recommendation of my dear friend, Masseria Ludgood, County Commissioner, Dr. Angelia Bendolph, who is just tearing it up. And we haven't even gotten to some of the other remarkable things, but back to scratching the scalp, okay?
So I don't know how old I was. And, my mom had specific requirements, and that was one of my jobs. Back then you did not talk back. You just did what you had to do.
Didn't we have this conversation earlier today?
You were gonna not be here. They meant what they said. So I was just scratching her scalp and watching the sound bites on the news. And I don't know. It's just something like the Lord just peeled back my eyes, the scales on my eyes, and I saw it in a way. That was my first time realizing that somehow I had made some kind of connection where my parents grew up in a world where none of those things impacted them, because they were like everything, right? So they did, you just idolize your parents, and who would want their parents to have grown up in such a, hostile and dehumanizing time as during, pre-civil rights. And so when I was listening to it, and I knew by then, like when my parents were born, and then when they were talking about certain things, and it just dawned on me, like, oh my gosh, you went through that. So you had to drink out of the colored fountain. You had to go through the back door. And it just, all of these things were just like revelatory to me. I don't know why that would be something. I guess because they protected us so much from things,
Yes.
And they did not talk about, my parents were not part of the movement. So as I know, from my childhood, they may have been, I don't know. So their act of resistance was just raising children to be, who they raised them to be. That's the way I describe it.
So, okay. So we only got about 5 or 10 minutes left. Okay.
Okay.
So 2 things I want to make sure you understand. Okay. Folks, this is a new day for you, and I'm Dr. Raul Richardson, joined by the lovely, remarkable Dr. Angelia Bendolph, who right now is going to, on the air, make a commitment to come back and be with me one more time again. Isn't that right, Dr. Bendolph?
I am. I'm loving it, and I'm just really enjoying myself.
But I want
to make it easy.
Well, I appreciate that. That's what it's supposed to be about. It's about, providing the keynote for this radio platform was created by 2 Black women. Candace Houston and her daughter Amberly, the Down South diva, and they had the vision to create this. And the moniker for the programming is to inform, entertain, and ultimately inspire you. And somehow or another, they have blessed me with acknowledging or visualizing or imagining that somehow or another I was going to present some intellect to the conversation on this radio platform. But forget about me. what I want to circle back to is
Mhm.
I'm so grateful that you started this conversation off with the acknowledgement of the ancestors and your grandparents and your great grandparents and your mother and father, because I want to talk a little bit about the organization that
Mhm.
you work with, because hearing you share about your grandfather and then discovering things at 12 years old that you didn't realize, and activism and civil rights, all that stuff, because, and I'm going to share this one thought, then I'm going to shut up and I'm going to give you the rest of the time.
Mhm.
You know, when I was a boy, about the same age as you were, maybe I was 6 or 7, I discovered that my great grandmother on my father's side, who at the time was 94 years old,
Mhm.
was a slave. And I remember
Mm.
thinking to myself, I wish that I had taken the opportunity
Yeah.
to listen to her and talk to her and ask her questions. So when she died, I felt a real tremendous sense of loss. And I'm like you in many ways in regards to, um, I, I, I've got a lot of books, and when I don't know something, I want to read about it. I want to learn
Mhm.
about it. And you know, I've been confronted with this idea of reparations and what's going on
Mhm.
in San Francisco and other parts. We're not going to go into that now, but we're going to come back to that later.
Right.
Let's go to Asala and what
Yeah.
that is, what the history of it is, what the roots of it is, and really, even though we only spent 5 minutes talking about that, I think that our loyal listeners really have gained some perspective about all of the things that shaped, motivated you, and
Mhm.
how it seems like divine intervention that leads
Mhm.
you to being involved with this organization. So let's talk about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it really is. And so right now I currently serve as the president. And so it's a group of right now 15 committed individuals who are passionate about the same thing. So preserving history, celebrating history, and that's what Asala is all about. Asala was founded by the great Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who
Amen.
is known as the founder or father of Black history. And of course, we know it started February started as Negro History Week, Black History Week, and now it's Black History Month. And so Asala can't, the relevance now is even more important than when Dr. Woodson founded it back in 1915 because of the attacks on just, us showing up and being able to just exist in our bodies and talk about, the things that matter to our culture, to our community. And, unfortunately, we are sometimes when we are described and we're hyphenated, it's the fact that some people forget that the last part, the American part, is who we are as well, right?
Mhm,
So
mhm.
our ancestors fought, bled, died, gave so much to this country, and it's only fair, it's only right to want to honor them and talk about their stories. That's how we keep them alive, right? And the oral history and ability to keep them alive comes from saying their names. And that's why, for me, when I heard, I know you say you're going to give me credit, but I'm going to give credit to who I heard it say it. That's why when I heard Dr. Angela Davis and Nikki Giovanni talk about especially the Black women in their lives, they honored their maternal ancestors. And so that is something that matters a lot to me, is like amplifying the voices of those who don't have a voice. And sometimes that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't talk, but it's just the fact that we may not be aware of where our place in society is in terms of just our values. So we have to, like, how society views us. But what the reason why I'm so passionate about Asala is that I refuse to take on the narrative of other people. I get to choose and I get to say whose voice matters. I don't just have to accept what other people say. So right now I get to choose to amplify the voices of my ancestors, amplify the voices of the elders, and honor those who gave so much. Basically, they gave all so that we could be here. And that's what I'm passionate about. And, that the part, my community and how I was raised is honoring the elders. And so I really want to see if there's a way for us to infuse that, right? To revive that, to actually recognize who we are and what we bring to the table, and not have, the horses already left the barn about celebrity and, celebrating all the things, the stars and all of that. And I wish that there was a way for us to amplify our messaging just as high as that, because there are so many people who do phenomenal things every day that you won't know the name of, but because you're doing the kind of thing that you're doing, you're sharing the story, you have a platform, you're keeping it alive. And that's what I really want to, you know, if I had a pet project or a personal project, I really want to continue to amplify those voices, those forgotten people, those who made us who we are. And I will tell you that when I found out my great grandfather couldn't read or write, it did impact me, but it also propelled me forward because I knew that he didn't have the opportunities that I have, and I knew that I would never squander them, right? Because I
God
got to
bless you.
show up in these
Amen.
spaces, yeah, where
Amen.
he couldn't, yeah. But I felt his presence in those spaces, and so many others when I felt like I was alone. But then I remember, and that's how I keep going. Because when I know that, you know, there's a scripture in the Bible, I think it's in Hebrews, where it says, "Whereby we are wherefore we are
Yes,
encompassed
yes, yes.
about by so great a cloud of witnesses."
That's
And
right.
I just envision that, but not only do I envision it about the children of Israel and all those great people who are listed in the historical canon that's listed, but I also add my ancestors to that. I feel like every time when I want to show up and it's overwhelming and it's hard, I call on, the name of the Lord, and I also visualize them being there with me. It's like, you represent us and we want you to know that you can do it. You know what I'm saying? I don't know how
I
that
know
sounds to
what you're saying.
people.
No, no, no,
but
no. You're
but
speaking truth, baby. I totally get it. Look, okay. Oh, Lord have mercy. Girl, you just, folks, I know that this is the airwaves, but I want you to know I absolutely adore and love this woman. Okay. So she is going to be back. And we haven't even scratched the surface of understanding the griot, the ancestor,
yes,
the
yes.
village, forget about cultural tribalism. What are the messages that need to be elevated? And,
Mm-hmm.
I saw a piece the other day my sister shared with me, and it was a young brother from the Nation of Islam, and he was talking about Elijah Muhammad, but he
Mm-hmm.
talked about this idea of what you do. Now, of
Mm-hmm.
course, he didn't know you, but he talked about we can't understand anything until we get a sense of our identity. Who
Yes.
are we? And when
Mm-hmm.
we understand who we are, then we'll have a different perspective about what might be representative when somebody says namaste, recognizing the spiritual God that's
Mm-hmm.
in another person. But when I recognize that, when I look at my brother or when I look at my sister, I
Mm-hmm.
see elements of myself in that. And
Right.
it makes it difficult for me to take their lives or
Mm-hmm.
disrespect them or not consider their needs or what pain or struggle they're embracing. And you, with this organization, Asala, are bringing forth all of that. I could not have orchestrated this any better with starting out by paying respect to the elders and the
Mm-hmm.
community and your grandfather and what impacts they made on you to allow you to become the person that you are. And now to
Mm-hmm.
see that even within the context of everything that you're doing in your professional life, this
Mm-hmm.
Asala represents us. And you know what? I'll tell you the truth. What you said relative to the messages, the lessons of who we are as a people,
Mm-hmm.
is being challenged by critical race theory even now.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And HB 7, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that piece of
Mm-hmm.
legislation currently
Mm-hmm.
in front of the Alabama State Legislature, which reflects a lot of what's happening in Texas and Governor DeSantis's efforts in Florida. You know, you have got to come back and be with me again. And I'm not talking
Yeah.
about like in 30 days or something. I'm talking about like real soon, okay? Because
Absolutely.
there
Absolutely.
is so much yet to explore, from understanding how young girls and women were portrayed and directed and guided and tracked in some ways. And I'm just so grateful that you took the time to be with me. To folks, see what y'all don't know, maybe you sense it within the context of what's going on here on the radio, but I'm gonna tell you right now, I can't talk to this woman enough.
Yeah, we tend to go for it, Dr.
Yes,
Ravel. We
yes,
tend to
we
go
do.
for
And
it.
1 hour is not enough time.
Yeah, yeah. You're right about that now. You're right about
Yeah.
that. It's
So
so much.
it is. So okay, we're gonna pause here.
Okay.
And I thank you for being with us. I am so grateful that the Most High God allowed us to be together. So thank you so much for joining us. Folks,
You're
we're going to
welcome.
pause and put a pin in it. but expect to see more of Dr. Angela Bendolph.